Hey everyone, welcome to Story Mantra Part 2 with my most favorite author forever, ALKA JOSHI, who is the international best-selling author of The Henna Artist, which has been translated into how many languages now? And
23, 26, something like that.
gosh, I wish I was 23 or 26 again. But I'm not. But that's how many languages this book has been translated to. And of course, my journey and romance with this book began on my little Kindle when I downloaded the book. And of course, it's not there yet because there's a shark swimming here. When I downloaded the book, because I simply couldn't wait for the hard copy to arrive. So I started reading it. And then, of course, when I hit close to the end, I was like frantic because I was like, oh, no. So I reached out to ALKA and I said, when's book 2 coming out? She's like, next year. I'm like, oh no. So I ordered my hardback and I kept that ready so that when I hit the end, I could read it again. So that's the first book I can say I read back to back. So
wow.
Yes, for me. And that's my matching bangle to match
Hey.
with the artist. Yes. And my matching kurti. And of course, I'm all nice and prepped to read this. I'm going to read it a third time. So if you haven't read the book, you know what to do. Read it a first time before The Secret Keeper of Jaipur comes out on June 22nd, or you will be running in the rat race to read the book because it's a fantastic book. So who is ALKA JOSHI? Apart from the fact that she's my favorite author, she is born in Jaipur, Rajasthan, India. I'm from Jaipur, so we're technically neighbors. Even though she's on the West Coast and in the US, I'm on the East, but that's besides the point. ALKA JOSHI has lived in the US since the age of 9. Her debut novel, The Henna Artist, became a New York Times bestseller, a Reese Witherspoon book club pick, an LA Times bestseller, a USA Today bestseller, long listed for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. I can never do justice to her bio. So I would say disregard most of what I say, go straight to her website. You'll find all the credentials there. They're outstanding. And the book is a work of art. It's not even a masterpiece. It's a work of art you want to frame. It's beautiful, which is why it became a New York Times bestseller, a USA Today bestseller, a Publishers Weekly bestseller, a Toronto Star bestseller, a Calgary Herald bestseller, and the list goes on. Welcome, ALKA, to Part 2 with us. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Anju. I could listen to you all day.
Oh my gosh, no. Ask my children, they will tell you a different story. But I really, guys, like I said, before I even talk to ALKA, I do want to tell you how much this book means to me, because when you're a woman from Asia, from India, and you've seen your own mother, you've seen your mother's mothers go through journeys that you wish you could change now, and you know they could not do nothing back then. Who are you to do anything now?
Yeah.
The question remains that 30, 40 years later, those women were fighting the same battles we are now. It's just on a different playing field, ALKA. And so you brought the 1950s to life, because my mom read the book in Jaipur. She lives there, and she was like, how much research did ALKA do? How did she do all the research? Because it's so precise.
Mm-hmm.
She brought the entire Jaipur 1950s to life, including Hawa Mahal, including the restaurants and the food and the flavors. But the story goes so much deeper. And of course, now it's a series. Talk to me about how the development of a series took place. How did it happen? Was it organic? Was it structured?
You know, here is an interesting thing I think that happens with authors. When it takes you 10 years to write your first book, and you have lived with these characters for 10 years in your head every single day on a piece of paper, whenever you're eating or showering or sleeping, you're thinking about these characters, they do start to sort of become your second family. And as a second family, I know them inside and out now. I know their backstory, their future story. I understand how they react in any given situation. So when The Henna Artist was put to bed and sent off to the printers, I started immediately thinking about Malik, one of the characters from The Henna Artist.
One of my favorites. I love him. I love him.
And he kept bugging me and saying, you know, I want to tell my story in the similar way that you've had a character, you know, bug you and say, I want to tell my story. I want to tell my story. And I know that people who don't write probably think that seems odd, that a character is speaking to you, even though they're from your imagination. But they do take on almost real, you know, anthropomorphic forms. And, you know, you actually do think about them as people in your imagination. So Malik kept bugging me, and he said, Now I'm all grown up, and I realized that he was 20 years old when he's talking to me. He has this wonderful education from the boarding school that Samir Singh has paid for him. And now he is back down in Jaipur as an apprentice to the Jaipur Palace. So we meet up again with the Maharanis, we meet up again with the Singhs, we meet up again with Manu and Kanta, who, as you know, without giving too much away, are very important in the henna artist.
And which is so easy to believe, Alka, because he struck a friendship with the cook in the henna artist without any double strings attached. He just did it on his own. And that left Lakshmi shocked, like, how on earth did you strike a friendship with a cook? And he's been getting lavish meals and being fed. And we're like, so I'm not surprised, because he's such a people person. Is that right?
Yeah. I don't know where he came from. You know, all of a sudden one day he was in my imagination, and he was watching Lakshmi crisscross the streets of Jaipur, and probably from one of the gates of the, Pink City. And he's playing marbles with his friends, and he's watching this same woman. And he's like, I've seen her before. And every time I see her, she's more confident. She's walking with more, self-esteem, and she's well turned out. Every time she's got new shoes on, she's got a new sari, she's got something going on. Who is this woman? And he sees that she walks very purposefully. She has somewhere to go all the time. So he thinks to himself, if I hitch my star to this woman, I could go places.
And he's so young.
Yeah, but he's like a lot of street kids that you and I have seen in India, right? And these street kids, they are everywhere in every major city. They run around in packs. They're probably busy hustling and getting some extra money, while their parents are busy making enough money for food for that night. And so they're often truant, because nobody is watching to see if they're going to school. And, they're just like, they're raising themselves. They are, in a way, Malik and Radha have a lot in common, because they're sort of raising themselves. They are fending for themselves and figuring out how to get along in life for themselves.
But also that's so true, because whether it's the streets of Jaipur or the streets of Calcutta or the streets of Bareilly, it doesn't matter. It's a survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And these little kids know that if they don't learn to fend for themselves, nobody else is going to do it for them. Yeah. So look, here I have a little tiffin
box.
And this has my father's initials in it. It says Joshi Babu.
Joshi Babu, really?
Yeah.
It's engraved. Yep.
Yeah, and so I just saw him approaching Lakshmi at the street corner. She is waiting to cross the street, and he just holds out his hand like this to her, and she thinks, oh no, it's another beggar, and she turns away. But then, maybe he tugs on her sari and holds out his hand again. And this time she thinks, well, let me see if this will work. So she takes one of her tiffins and she puts it in his hand, and he just closes his fingers around it. And then she turns around and he follows her. And from then on, they have always worked together. So that's kind of how I saw it happening. And I have so many of these from my family. This is the smallest one. And we have a much taller one, like with maybe 5 different compartments.
4 or 5 tiers. Yep. I remember.
Yeah. And so I just thought, that seems like a way that the two of them would have gotten together. And so then, he's bugging me in this. And I thought, well, by the age of 20, I think he's savvy enough that he would have a love interest. So he does. He has been involved with this Himalayan mountain woman. And this is where I had another fabulous bit of research that I got to do. She's from one of those Himalayan tribes. They're nomadic, and they travel up north for the winter, in the summer for the steeper climbs, and that's where they actually have their homes. And then when it gets too cold up there, they come down again with their flocks of sheep and water buffalo and goats down in the lower Himalayas. And that's how he ends up meeting her. And her husband has died tragically on one of these treks down a mountain. And so, she and Malik get along, and, next thing you know, they're sleeping together, and, these things happen, And so this book is taking place in 1969.
Okay.
So, by then things are a little bit looser maybe. And so Malik is involved with this woman, but Lakshmi sends him down to Jaipur to get this apprenticeship going where he learns about construction. And in doing that, he runs across some secrets that are being held by the Maharanis or the Singhs. He doesn't know who, but some of the construction work is going awry. And one of the big cinema houses, and this is like the cinema house Rajmandir in
Rajmandir, oh
Jaipur.
my God, it's still there. Do you know?
Yeah, but I don't. Is it still open? Because I think somebody else bought it and they're doing all kinds of other things with it.
Well, I don't know in the COVID situation what happened, but the last time I was there, which was like 3 years ago in Jaipur, it was still running and they were still running films. And that, I think one of the most famous films has been running in that theater for like 15 or 20 years.
Yeah,
One of the big Bollywood films. And so that Rajmandir is famous not just for being the cinema from way back, but also for still running films from way back.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
a landmark.
and for a long time, it was the only cinema house for miles around. So it was a really big deal for people to come into Jaipur to watch a film there. They would probably end up sleeping, the night in some pensione, or even along the roadside somewhere, just so they could go to this cinema house. It was a big deal. So in the fashion of Rajmandir, there is a state-of-the-art cinema house that's being constructed by the Maharanis, and it collapses on the opening night.
Ooh.
That's where Malik, as we know, he's very loyal, and he knows that if the blame for this tragedy is going to be set upon people he loves, people whom he trusts, people who are loyal to him, he knows that he needs to do something about it. So that's what's going to happen. He's going to enlist Lakshmi's aid up in Jaipur to help him figure out what's going on here. And then as it turns out, whatever's happening in Jaipur is also impacting his beloved up in Shimla. So it's very important for him to get all
what
of
a
this
coincidence this is, because your second book, part of it takes place in Shimla.
Yeah.
Part of my second book takes place in Manali.
Oh.
Which I had to rephrase Mansali because I needed the flexibility of travel and, just the whole structure of the place. So when I read that part of it takes place in Shimla, I was like, oh my gosh, the northern Himalayan foothills, who would have thought the coincidence?
Yeah.
It's incredible. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, I love Malik. He is this flamboyant character full of strength, but he's so street smart. He knows when to open his mouth and when to keep it shut.
Yeah.
Unlike Radha, who's still learning to navigate that.
Right.
That one scene when she's almost ready to hit Sheila with a stone, and it's like, oh boy. But Malik already knows, and he's so smart, he doesn't even let anybody else in on what he's thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you transition his character from book one, where he plays such a minor role compared to Lakshmi and Radha? Not that he's minor in any way, that book sneaks up, but compared to the other two, how did you transition him from having his own book in Secret Keeper of Jaipur?
It wasn't that difficult. And I think, I started to say the first book took me 10 years, but The Secret Keeper only took me 2 years. And the third book I'm writing, which is going to be about Radha as an adult, will only also take me about 2 years, because I already know all these characters. They all come back in every book. And as you know, writing a series is actually easier for an author because it's the same characters that we're writing about. They know that, we know them so well. And so we can tell that even if we put them in situation A, situation B, or situation C, we know how they're going to react in these situations. Don't you find that with your characters as well in your series?
I've been living with mine since the year 2000. So, I know them so well now. They spring off, and simply, it's like they're literally on a springboard jumping all over my head. They're like popping up all over. The question for me is to be able to contain them and then to say, let's take you. The harder part for me is to find their backstories. And that usually for me as a writer in my process comes about when I sit down. And my characters, I don't know how it works for you, but my characters literally come alive when pen hits the paper.
Oh.
So it's very different. So I can think about it and I can ponder over, what do they like? What are they doing? But until pen hits paper, nothing happens. I could do
Oh,
guesswork. I have even tried writing a first draft on the laptop. The only thing that happens is a blinking game. I'm blinking at the cursor is blinking back at me, and nothing happens, nothing moves. So I realized that though it's the long-winded process, it's got to be, I bleed on the page, literally. That's one.
wow. See, now my process is very different. I think about the whole scene that I'm going to be writing about. I think about it in my head, and it just keeps going around and around in my head. And I keep editing it in my head. I keep editing where the players are moving, what they're wearing, how they're speaking to one another. As I go for a walk, or as I go for a bike ride, or as I swim, I'm constantly moving. And then with me, the scene starts moving and the characters are moving in the scene. And so by the time I get ready to write, I have already been thinking about this scene and I already know exactly what's going to happen to it. So then for me, it's almost like a brain dump onto the laptop. And then I can move on to the next scene, which I'm going to figure out in my head. So for book number 3, all of my scenes, I'm figuring out in my head what is happening, who is in the scene, what they're saying to one another, and then I start writing it down. So it's almost like I never look at that blank page. I'm never even thinking about that cursor, because by the time I'm writing, it's just going blah, 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 blah,
All over
like
the
that.
place.
Yeah.
See, and what happened for me was I used to do that. So I'd be on the treadmill in the morning or the cross trainer, and those
Yeah.
scenes would play out. So this did happen. But when pen hit the paper, it changed.
Oh,
Characters took on a different life. They started saying things and doing things which were not what I had been thinking in my head. And so I was like, really? So this is what happens, and not what I was doing and thinking about this morning. So
wow.
I have to play 2 stories in my head, one which I'm trying to navigate, somewhere up here, and the other which actually takes a different turn when I'm writing. Um, but that's it's so wonderful to know your process. But how do you develop your characters? If you're able to structure the scene in your head and put all this together, and then it's like a dump on the page, how do you then develop characters? Because I think a lot of writers also would like to know, including myself, how you develop them from one book to the next.
Huh. Well, I'm not really sure that I think about it consciously. I just know that, it's 12 years later.
Yeah.
And I already knew from so many things I had written for the henna artist that never made it to the book. I already knew what was going to happen between Lakshmi and Dr. Kumar. I already knew where Radha was going to end up, and whether she was going to be in Jaipur at the time that all of this is happening, or in Shimla. I already knew that. I already knew also that Ravi and Sheila were going to be married, because they're going to be married in the henna artist. So they're married now in The Secret Keeper. I know that they live in a separate house with their parents, because that is something I set up in the henna artist. So everything I set up in the henna artist is now taking place and coming to life in The Secret Keeper. And once again, everything that I set up in The Secret Keeper is going to come to life in book number 3, which I think is so exciting about writing a series. Yes. Because you get to have this continuity. And it's almost like, when we binge watch TV shows,
yes,
we love the continuity. We love to get to know characters from one episode to the next, and then one season to the next, So that is, I think, the joy of writing a series. It's like getting to love these characters as real people.
Well, for me, the bigger joy is to see a book that I have fallen in love with, and a series that I fall in love with, your series, being able to come to life on the silver screen. Because, Alka, for a long time, I grew up in Hong Kong, and we would get the best of American and British TV series on these 2 English TV channels. But there was no person, no character I could identify with.
Right. No brown people.
No brown people. And if you saw 1 or 2 of them, that was like, oh my gosh, look, there's, but technically.
And they were usually the servants.
Or stereotyped to be something which really didn't make sense, like, a Slumdog Millionaire character off the streets.
Right.
Somebody illiterate. And so, that explains why when people would say, where did you go in the summers? I'd be like, how do I tell them I went to Jaipur and Bareilly, where Nani and Nana live in one family and Dadi and Dada live in the other, which maternal and paternal grandparents, because people didn't understand. So now when I see a series like yours coming to life, I think of the next generation who has the power to say, yes, there is representation for us and our skin color and our values and our system of beliefs and all that we've been through in the last 60, 70 years.
Yes. Yes. I think that that's one of the tremendous joys of writing, Anju. I think as a South Asian author, it's the ability to bring our culture to life and in all its glory, but also in all its maybe ugliness, you know, just being able to bring it to life so that people have an understanding of our culture in its entirety, not just in a tiny little segment like, oh, you guys know all about yoga, or, oh, you guys are the ones that wear those saris, those long pieces of cloth.
Oh,
You know, now people have can have more of a 360-degree understanding of where we come from.
which goes against stereotypes, which thanks to media has got a very, very, I would say, you know, one-sided view, one-sided
Yeah.
angle.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when I see a character, for example, like Lakshmi, and I see how, despite not having everything, she got everything in the end that a woman could not even have dreamt of at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, ask my mom who grew up in that era, and she would say having that level of freedom and that independence would be like something you can only imagine the next generation could have.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you know, so just seeing that come to life through her. And my other question was, you talked about Radha coming to life in book 3.
Mhm.
So this is what I'm burning to ask. One is, Radha started off more uneducated than Lakshmi in the henna artist in terms of the ways of the wealthy, behavior, mannerisms, culture.
Right.
She was like just molded from clay when
Yeah.
she's introduced into the book. And oh gosh, I love how you introduce her. Shy, timid, petrified, scared. Within a few days and a few weeks, she starts growing stronger and bolder, and the colors of the saris become her inner vibrancies. That's what I
Mm.
began to see. So you describe the fuchsia saris, the magentas, the this, that, which is what the women of Rajasthan wear. We
Yeah.
wear our bright colors. But you see that beginning to come out within Radha, not so much in Lakshmi.
Yeah.
How does she translate to book 3, where she becomes this connoisseur of perfumes in Paris?
Yeah. Well, she's not so much, I would say, a connoisseur of perfumes, but because she was so good at mixing paints for the old man in the village,
Mhm.
because she was so good at mixing henna, she has a degree of innate knowledge about chemistry, and she has a sort of an understanding of what ingredients go together. So she studied at the Sorbonne in Paris. She met her husband when he was traveling through the Himalayas, her French husband. They, of course, in typical Radha style, she elopes with him. She doesn't even wait to get married. She's so impetuous, and that impetuousness has never left her. She still operates on impulse. So she runs away with him. She gets married, but you know, the marriage turns out to be okay. And she has 2 little girls in Paris. She's actually got the life she's always wanted. She has the family. And then she decides, and she actually discovers that because of her knowledge of chemistry, and she gets that degree, she wants to go into the fragrance business because it is such a big deal in France. And then as she does that, she discovers that she has ambition that she didn't know she had. She has the same kind of ambition that Lakshmi did, but Lakshmi didn't have a lot of the education that now Radha has had.
Right.
So Radha is able to go even further, just like every generation is able to go further than the last generation because of education. So she's able to go further, and she is on the cusp of developing the signature scent for her master perfumer whom she works for. And there are 3 lab assistants for that master perfumer. Radha is one of them. She wants to be the one to win the signature scent competition.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, yeah. So she is working night and day. And you know what? At the same time, she is going through the same things that all working women today are going through, which is, how much time do I devote to my family when I have found that I love the work that I'm doing?
Yes.
So I am torn. I am torn. When I'm at work, I'm thinking about the family. When I'm with my family, I'm thinking about the work. So she's going to undergo a lot of that same kind of conflict that many working mothers go through. But at the same time, there's going to be this new conflict in her life. Somebody she hasn't seen in 18 years is going to show up at her door in Paris, somebody from the henna artist. And that is going to come as a whole shock to her.
You know, I actually heard you talk about that on Instagram. And ever since then, I'm like, I cannot wait 2 years. I cannot wait 2 years. I'm already waiting to read book 3, like now. So I'm so sorry we have to end here, but you know what you need to do, everyone. It's been fabulous talking to ALKA, and we hope to have her again. But in the meantime, you know, you need to click on the link below, buy her books now, like today, and do the smarter thing like I did. Get your Kindle version now and then get your hardback too. You will not regret it. Really. You'll be the happiest person on earth, because then you can carry her books around wherever you go. Summer is coming up. It's the most beautiful beach read. And when anyone asks what you're reading, just flash the cover. And that's it. That's all you need to do. Thank you so much, ALKA. Give us one query tip, writing tip, craft tip for our readers and writers out there.
You need time away from your work. Sometimes when you are stuck, when you are really pounding your head because you're like, oh, why can't I just get this scene right? You just need to step away. You might step away for a couple of hours, or you might step away for a week. It's okay to step away from your work, because when you come back to it, you will look at it with fresh eyes, and your solution will come to you. I swear to you, it will come to you.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate the time and all the attention given, you know, us here. And of course, we just enjoy talking about your books, me especially. So thank you, ALKA. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anju.
All right, bye.